Japan Cuts 2020. It's online through this Thursday. Get some tickets. I'm reviewing some things. Number 2, let's go. I've been to a nuclear power plant. In my junior year of college, I took a journalism class specifically focused on the Indian Point Energy Center in New York, during which my peers and I did independent research and wrote up articles arguing whether the nuclear plant should remain in operation, at least for now, or should be shuttered immediately. I was in the former camp, but unfortunately the weird flash animation that accompanied my work seems not to have made much of a difference considering the plant will be shutting down in April of next year. Notably, this class took place after the nuclear disaster at Fukushima Daiichi, caused by the devastating earthquake and subsequent tsunami in Japan's Tohoku region. If September 11th, 2001 was America's defining moment of this century thus far, then it seems March 11th, 2011 was Japan's. So many movies at Japan Cuts this year make offhanded references to the earthquake or even explicitly mention what happened at Daiichi, and it makes me realize that that has been true every year for years, and I've just been more aware of it this time around because of the festival's centerpiece presentation, Fukushima 50. Fukushima 50 is named for the workers at the plant who remained on site amidst the meltdowns. Of course, this title was given to them by the English language press because the Japanese word for 50 lacks the alliterative character, but clearly it stuck. And it is largely what it promises, a depiction of 3/11 and the days that followed, primarily told from the perspective of the people who stayed at the plant. By sheer and perhaps unfortunate coincidence, my girlfriend rewatched Chernobyl last week because she had just picked up a new book on the subject, and it's a great show, so why not? While this largely coincided with me editing my Assassination Nation review, I did find myself listening or even looking over fairly often, occasionally just stopping to go sit and watch some of the show's more intense set pieces. It's unfortunate because it set a precedent for what a retelling of a major nuclear disaster should look like. But let's be honest, a single episode of Chernobyl probably cost more than the entirety of Fukushima 50. I mean, scenes like the divers in darkness at the end of episode 2 or that oneer in episode 4 where the small group is helping clear off the roof of the plant are just stunning. And it's kind of too bad Fukushima 50 contains a scene reminiscent of the former, as technicians go into heavily radiated areas of the plant to turn some valves and release pressure to keep containment chambers from literally exploding. It's very tense, but it doesn't come anywhere near what Chernobyl delivers. But this is also a different kind of story because Fukushima Daiichi was a different kind of disaster. By the time anyone knew something was wrong at Chernobyl, it was already too late. The reactor had exploded and been exposed, and radiation detection units hundreds of miles away would be picking up on it within days. Everything that we see was damage control to stop catastrophe from becoming cataclysm. Fukushima, on the other hand, was something else. After the earthquake, which was the strongest ever recorded off the coast of Japan, a tsunami with waves upward of 120 feet above sea level hit the coast, and the plant wasn't ready. Water flooded the facilities and shut down the diesel generators that were required to keep the cooling systems running after the power went out and the reactors themselves had been shut down. And the people there were working to keep it from reaching catastrophe in the first place. And they did. While some radiation was released into the air and there are still people who are not able to go back to their homes, it is a much less dangerous place to be than Pripyat. The worst case scenarios never happened, and surely we've got those workers to thank for that, at least in part, the 50 who get all of the credit, and then the hundreds of others who came in to help as well. Having a film to highlight them is good. They believed that they were making the ultimate sacrifice, and they should be celebrated for what they did. And the film is at its best and most moving when people are grappling with their fates. But because this is a Japanese production, there is an air of nationalism that runs through it. I mean, Russia is apparently working on a Chernobyl show of their own, and they will be using it to blame CIA espionage for the whole thing. There is obviously incompetence on display in Fukushima 50 from the people outside of the facility who are not putting their lives on the line. But there are no rogue operators saving the day the way you might see in a Hollywood disaster movie. Even if Ken Watanabe's superintendent shouts at his superiors, ultimately he does what he's told. Fukushima 50 isn't really here to indict anyone, not even really the plant's owner, TEPCO. There were reports that the plant was susceptible to exactly the sort of seismic event that ultimately took it down more than a decade before. But no one's bringing up the government's role in allowing it to continue operating, because that speaks to a deeper rot than the film is interested in exposing. Now, this is a movie that ends by telling us that the torch's route for the Tokyo Olympics that were supposed to kick off just a couple of days ago would begin in Fukushima as a sign of Japan's perseverance and ability to overcome and rebuild. That is what it's about. And weirdly, also the close relationship between Japan and America's militaries. And there's this really strange subplot about the US involvement and some random American military guy who remembers all the fond times he had being a child in Fukushima. And we see some flashbacks that I cannot for the life of me understand the purpose of. Like, this character comes back multiple times to rally the troops, and it's so weird and bad. Like, fucking why? Of course, the film is also, perhaps inevitably, about the dangers of nuclear power. And that's unfortunate because nuclear power is kind of really important as the world works towards carbon neutrality. Maybe not in the long term, as renewable energies become more efficient and stable, but the shift away from nuclear power globally has absolutely meant that more fossil fuels were burned than was necessary. Nuclear power emits no greenhouse gases. It is a carbon-free energy source, and it provides a lot of stable power. There is a reason that these plants were spun up in the first place. But the downsides are obvious. It's not just about possible disasters, it is about the extremely dangerous waste that nobody has figured out what to do with over the long term. At Indian Point, the spent fuel rods are kept in cement or dry casks on site until someone figures out a better place for them. Officially, it's all supposed to go to Yucca Mountain in Nevada, but that's been a shit show for decades. And even if it wasn't, there are other concerns, like how does it get there? The only way to transport them is on trucks, but what happens if one of those trucks gets into an accident on a highway and nuclear waste spills out and irradiates a town? It's a terrifying thought. But does that terror outweigh the benefits of fossil fuel-free power? I spent a semester talking to people who dedicated their lives to saying absolutely it does, but I'm not convinced. I get that it would rub audiences the wrong way if the film ended with a text scroll that said, "This was bad, but a good idea, and the lesson is not that we need to stop doing it, but we need to do it in safer locations under the purview of people who will listen to experts and take all of the necessary precautions instead of just hoping that the worst never happens." But it still should have said that. 6.3 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hamray and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, @BlazienFMA, Magnolia Denton, Elliot Fowler, and Greg Lucina. If you like this video, that's great. If not, I'm sorry. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Hope to see you in the next one.